Ladies and gentlemen, sit down, grab some snacks, and get ready to have your mind blown, because you're watching the ups and downs of Nicolas Cage.
Yes, thank you, hello, and welcome to the ups and downs of Nicolas Cage, where every week we take a look at the best and the worst that Nicolas Cage has to offer. As always, I'm your host, Logan Mock, here to take you on this journey. And today is a Monday, which means we're taking a look at one of his better films. Today, we're looking at 1984's Birdy. Birdy was released in 1984, directed by Alan Parker, written by William Wharton, and on $12 million of a budget, it made $1.4 million at the box office. The film follows Birdy, a man who, after returning from the Vietnam War, is mute and is not speaking to anyone. He is recruiting from everyone that interacts with him inside a mental institution, and his friend, played by Nicolas Cage, who is also in the war, is trying to get him to be normal and to react to stuff before he's permanently sent away in the mental institution. I think it's clear to say that this film was not intended for my audience. It's a period piece about the Vietnam War. Half of it is about the least interesting part of the Vietnam War, before it happened and nothing leading up to it. And in the second half, it takes place after the Vietnam War, which is the second least interesting part of the Vietnam War. Second to, of course, the Vietnam War. The movie itself doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The main character, Birdy, we never actually learn his name, is obsessed with birds. Before he even went to war, he was absolutely obsessed with them. He would dress as them in order to take some, in order to train them. He built an aviary in his backyard. He built a bird cage underneath his bed. He's obsessed with them. And in the descriptions of the movie I've seen, it's all about how Nicolas Cage wants to help his friend, who's now in the mental institution, tried to become more like a bird. That doesn't really happen. He becomes sort of like a bird before he leaves, but once they're back and he's trying to make him seem sane again, it's just about making him become sane. Some misleading descriptions, like they're saying that he wants to make him feel like a bird, he wants to get him to fly. That stuff happens before, not after. And so I was expecting a different movie, which might have added to my disappointment of the film. I didn't really like the film. The directing of it seemed odd at sometimes. The choices that they chose to go with seemed a little bizarre. And again, it's probably because I'm not the intended audience. But there is something that I really, really like about this film. And that is the characters and their interactions. Nicolas Cage plays an extroverted high school jock. He gets all the ladies. He's just being a regular kid. And Birdy is an introvert. He's secluded, barely has any friends, and all of his time is spent with birds. And it's the dynamics between these two characters that really makes the film interesting. Both of them play their characters phenomenally. Even through everything that they've been through, you can tell that they do seem to have a connection. They're able to play to that degree, that their relationship of being best friends, even though they're two completely different people, is not, it doesn't seem forced or awkward. It seems natural. It seems like a real relationship that could happen. It's the classic thing, like the extrovert and the introvert are together and they both complete the opposite, the yin and yang, like they both fill in what the other one is missing. And it works. It's one of the greatest performances I've seen of them interacting and just being friends. And neither of them change overnight because of a pep talk that happens in some films. Like, they stay the way they are until the war happens because that's who they are. The film doesn't try and force any massive psychological changes that don't really happen overnight. And to that degree, the film is incredible. The characters, the performances, that aspect is insanely well done. But unfortunately, that's not the whole film. And so I'll talk about the whole film. And I'll go into the spoiler territory after a quick ad break.
Interested in making your own podcast but not sure where to start? Anchor makes it easy. Anchor has creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And best of all, it's free. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
So the film starts off with Birdy in the mental institution. He's cowering against a wall, not talking to anyone. And Nicolas Cage comes in. He has bandages on his face because he was injured in Vietnam. And what he's trying to do is convince the psychiatrist and the doctors that Birdy isn't insane, but he's just a little confused so that he's not permanently sent away to a mental institution. Then the film flashes back to before the war, and we see Nicolas Cage. He's playing baseball with some neighborhood kids, and he hits a ball into the yard of an old lady. And we learn that the old lady is Birdy's mom, and that once a ball goes in the yard, it's never found. That's a recurring thing in the movie. And slowly between Birdy and Nicolas Cage, a friendship starts to form. Nicolas Cage starts to show an interest in Birdy's birds. He helps him catch a few of them. He helps build the aviary in Birdy's backyard. And they start to become really good friends. Birdy ends up making 2 pigeon suits for them to wear in order to catch birds better. And after Birdy jumps off of a tall construction building onto a pile of sand and almost kills himself, Birdy and Nicolas Cage are in some trouble, and they decide that they should do some more of what Nicolas Cage wants to do instead of what Birdy wants to do in order to be safer and, just be better for everyone. So they go to a boardwalk. They're trying to pick up some girls, but Birdy isn't able to because he's socially awkward. And through this whole thing, it's cutting back and forth between the present and the past. I'm going to do it in the past first and then the present because it'd be easier for me to recall that way. But eventually, Birdy starts to expand on his interest in birds. He is planning on flying with a machine based on how birds do fly. He's showing some interest in this girl at prom who showed interest in his bird stuff. And he does fly for a bit. After he and Nicolas Cage bike off of a pile of trash in a junkyard. He's able to fly for a bit before falling in water. And then the night of prom comes. And this is when the film gets to be its worst, in my opinion. Instead of doing anything with his date after prom is over, Birdy goes to his house. And he gets naked and sleeps in his aviary. And then holds a bird very close to his face. We saw the bird in a few earlier scenes. Her name is Perda, and she is a bird, and he is a man. And it's a little weird when it's like a very intimate scene between the two of them. And then there's like a 3-minute shot of like a bird's view flying over the streets. It loses me a little in that sense. It's a very weird scene. Like, I just want to see Nicolas Cage and Birdy joke around a bit. Like, have some old jokes and some language that's not okay now, but was back then in the Vietnam War time. And he wakes up in the bird cage, naked, and Nicolas Cage is there. And he says, you know what, you gotta stop with all this bird stuff. It's getting weird. And then they join the war. They see some bad stuff, which shatters Birdy's brain, scars Nicolas Cage. And then it's in the present. Birdy is still in the mental institution, and Nicolas Cage is trying to help him. And Nicolas Cage's emotion goes back and forth. Like, he's angry at Birdy for not talking because he is upset that his friend isn't there anymore. And then he goes to sorry that he can't help Birdy more. And this whole time he's trying to do stuff that'll get him to talk. Like, he's showing him pictures of birds. He finds all the baseballs that Birdy's mom stole over the years. But nothing seems to be working. He's getting angrier, and then eventually, miraculously, Birdy talks to him. But then the doctor doesn't believe it. And so he calls 2 orderlies to get Nicolas Cage out of there and to get Birdy. And then Nicolas Cage fights them back, and they escape to the roof. And these last few minutes I genuinely enjoyed them. When Birdy starts to talk again, the movie becomes good. They go up to the roof, and Birdy's on the edge of it, and he jumps off, flapping his arms like they're bird wings. And you think that he's dead, and Nicolas Cage does too, and he runs up, and then the dramatic music stops, and he's just on the roof of the building. He looks up to Nicolas Cage and says, "What?" And the film ends. And I liked that last scene. I thought it was funny. I wish there was more of that in this film. And that's the problem with having a really good scene at the end of your movie that was not that good, is that it colors the rest of the movie because you're only thinking of the last few minutes. The rest of it is sort of shrunk into those last few minutes, and you think of the whole movie as better. But you have to think and remember about why it was so bad. And with that, I'd give the film a 5 out of 10. It was confusing in the wrong ways. It went into areas that I thought were weird. I'm probably not the target demographic for this film. But Nicolas Cage's performance, I'll give an 8 out of 10. He did a phenomenal job of